We've been living here now for 27 years. When we came, it was a derelict farmhouse, tiny farmhouse with no water, no drains. The water came from the village pump. And the back behind the house was all overgrown and rank. And the top part of the field beyond was worked by the chap who kept the pub, who had mangles and potatoes in it in alternate years. And as it was just after the war, we kept it going as a market garden, or doing all the work ourselves and with the help of visitors. The barn was much more ramshackle than it is now. It was sort of hand-to-mouth building, fascinating. Oak, very worm-eaten at the edges and just dropping. When I had the roof done, the chap said, well, you have to be careful, because the builder said, you have to be careful, because when we take the tiles off, the walls will probably fall down. I always thought it was the reverse. Anyway, here it is. I get a tremendous lot of pleasure from this incredibly crude woodwork, which the place, by which the place is held up. You can see in parts the joints, and they hardly seem to work. The verticals hardly seem to be in direct contact with the horizontals. I mean, the kind of roughing out of this beam where you have to get a tree trunk which works. This is something. The end part was a stable, and there would have been some kind of cart, but certainly a horse was kept in there. And there were a lot of harness which is lying about still, old balances which are on the wall. But I've kept a lot of these bits and pieces which are hanging around the wall. I wouldn't think of getting rid of them. They've lain about, and gradually, curiously enough, they've come in. They've been brought into what I do just through the presence of them being here all the time, I think, and they've caught my eye. They've connected with other ideas which I've had. I got to know a wheelwright who lived in the village of Ampleforth. He was a marvellous workman because the kind of skill in the making of a wheel is immense. And he provided me with some of the first blocks of wood which I carved, old mature blocks of lime and pear which he'd had in stock. The designs then were largely bound up by the shape of the log. Wood in the round tends to split as it dries, and I used the split as part of the idea in the design of an exposure of the middle, because the wood splits towards the middle, and the central section of growth, in a sense, is bit by bit revealed. There was an idea running through this, which was used for some time, of the outside being an enclosure, almost like a garment of what was within. This was inherent in the log, that this tiny central cylinder out of which a tree grows the secret middle. And this is present in the body. The inner warmth in the body is like this. I used to enjoy very much the sensation of being wrapped in a very big coat, this thing of being buttoned up against the cold. And some of these are bearing this out. I moved gradually into working casting in lead, and it opened up the possibilities of the figure treated more directly. I found the activity of watching people as they passed me in the street, or watching people assemble to get on board buses, the fascinating patterns of contiguity and separation between individuals. And none of this seemed meaningless. It worked itself out in the course of time into a number of sculptures which were using this idea of the space between a unit in the group, little sort of disrupting groups of figures, rather like clods of earth. Again and again I've had evidence before my eyes of this interesting idea. What is it that holds any group together? Why is it that a gaggle of 9 people settle in the space they do? Why do they leave so much area in the middle? The space is electrifying. It's meaningful. There is obviously a point which I experimented with a great deal, of how far you can divide things and still hold them together. I made a number of experiments. How far can you draw them apart and still feel that the electricity is biting? It's like an arc, electric arc. At which point does it snap? When I was doing this kind of thing, I believe the figures were, in the first place, surrounded. They were figures on a beach where the controlling elements of form are very, very big. But this is fascinating to watch. Why is it that people face the sea? I had some marvelous examples of this, watching people settle and do this, and thinking about why, just how they accommodated their backsides onto particular parts of rocks and set themselves the way they did. It's an intensely sculptural thing against the great plain of the sea. I did a certain number of figures with only one leg and one arm, because that was all I could see. That was the record of the form at that particular moment. That was sufficient to identify it by. There was just that leg, there was that arm, there was maybe no head. I took what I saw, in a sense, as a starting point. And in the course of time, they became more realistic. They had to depart from some of the formality and rigidity of the carving pieces. They made their point of departure from this kind of crisp construction. And I think at that time I was very conscious of the difficulty of combining the elasticity of the figure, its ease of articulation, with a kind of rigidity of design which I've been used to handling in carving, the crispness of carved wood. And it worked itself out again and again in piece after piece, where I was searching for a combination of these two elements, of the flexible thing running inside a rather crisp exterior. To work my way out from this style in which I'd been working took a very long time. I tried first of all enlarging the sort of idea which I'd been doing, and I found it didn't enlarge, it didn't stand up to the increased size. And what happened was, I think, that I gradually lost touch, or had to lose touch, with the identity of the figure. And I found that I moved away from looking at people. I stopped drawing them. And I started drawing natural objects, rocks in the first place. I never regard the idea of texture as merely a surface consideration. A texture is, in a sense, simply the outward manifestation of a form of structure. Plaster goes through the same process as metal, as being at one stage fluid and at another stage rigid. It sets a fluidity. I have a number of sea charts where everything is fluid. All the currents, all the little sandbanks. A complete statement of messy fluidity. And this, in a sense, comes through in what the plaster is. Now, at certain times, the mere fact of touch, I would also say, in one's life is crucial. It's not nothing. Contact, physical contact. The moment of welding became, in a sense, an important thing, the idea of the mere contact between two forms being so crucial, and that moment being sort of perpetuated. With one sputtering fire of the gun, you stuck two things together so that they can't part. We've got to think out where to aim the weld. Where do these points legitimately stick? And how much of the stick is adequate, and how much of it shall show, and is it in fact integrated in the design? It's another element which has got to be added, and it makes its presence felt. You can see it. It accounts for the strength of the structure. These structures that come on now couldn't be made in any other way than as welded structures. For a number of years I've been instinctively drawn towards plant forms and their relation to human forms, their breathing and digestive systems, and I've used them out of sheer interest in material which they provide, spontaneously and instinctively. And it looks as though in recent work I've used more and more three elements. The elements provided by a stem, the strength of a support, the elements provided by a leaf which are an extension in space, airborne, the capacity of a comparatively frail form to maintain itself in the air. This is very wonderful in petal and leaf forms, particularly some of the bigger examples of this. The capacity of a form to maintain itself with almost extreme fragility in the air. And the fruit and flower forms which form in conjunction with these, often very interestingly angled, variable in direction and form, according to pressures on the growth of the plant, where it's situated, its relation to the light. I had a very profitable chance entrance into the botany department at Leeds. It was one of those beautiful things, a door I went past so often. A chance conversation with one of the assistants there brought me in. Professor Manson, who ran this little research lab, had a marvelous collection of modern prints, and these were lined up on the walls alongside the magnifications of drops of dirty water, which her team was investigating. And it opened up to me this world of inner structure, which I think has really played a very important part in what I've done since. The way in which the camera explores structures in which spaces, structures, rooms, corridors are continually opened before it. Everything is light, hollow, so to speak. And this, I think, made a tremendous impression on me. That one is in amongst a structure. I was more aware of the exploration of these forms outside myself, which are bigger than me, of buildings, of ruins. The ruins of fountains became much more of a force to me than they'd been before. It was a similar kind of exploration, what I was doing in walking around fountains, to what a botanist is doing in walking around the minute structures of some botanical form. As indeed an insect explores a plant. next group of sculptures exploited this more and more. They turned to an interior structure, in which, in a sense, one moved in amongst the forms of the figure. I was still attached to the figure as a theme. But it was, in a sense, an exploration of an anatomy. And I was reducing the number of elements with which I was dealing. This was quite a new departure for me. I was dealing with a few key elements. The ring element, the wall element of the body, and the threads of other forms in it. The ring form often remains concealed in natural forms as a key force in the structure in plant and animal form. And one doesn't always see it clearly declared. It lies underneath. And the anatomical interest is really to expose and explore. One has always got to feel the complete necessity, the rightness of the metal one uses. One wouldn't use it if it was in any sense a battle against. I turned to aluminium because, in fact, it was a material which I could afford. The actual quality and tonal quality of it, its character appealed to me very much, because when one works on it, it does, in fact, in a sense, carve. One rasps it away, it shears very cleanly. It's a kind of carving that one does to the edges, the surfaces, the form of the thing in general, which eventually shows through. I can think of times when one blotted out a lot of what the metal was trying to do. But on the other hand, you've got to listen to it, and you can be dumb for a very long time to what a material is, in a sense, always trying to tell you. And this, in a sense, is fatal. I got hold of a copy many years ago, a book of woodcuts of Vesalius, the anatomist of the 16th century, and these made a great impression on me. They linked so closely with medical sections which I'd seen, anatomical sections which I'd seen, and the frankness of the medical approach to the body, which seeks to investigate it without fear. And the Vesalius woodcuts all show this. Man is seen as a normal part of his surroundings, even in his crude, stripped-down anatomical state. It linked with an earlier period in which I worked, when I'd found what was to me the importance of fragments. At whatever stage you see it, at whatever stage of completion you see an anatomical figure, its importance is equal to any other stage. all fragments are important. The Vesalius woodcuts always interpret the figure as a beautiful thing. Its elegance comes out of this. And this appealed to me. The linkage in the body, the movement in the arm, in the leg, is extremely fluent. But I was interested to obtain some of the subtlety, even with these rectangular and mechanical forms, some of the subtlety which is in a body form, its ability to turn easily, its sense of twisted muscularity. Greater economy than I did. The idea of an economy appeals to me tremendously, so that each part speaks with the greatest clarity. I've been led to this partly by the new field of the commercial material, sheet, angle, rod, in which I'm dealing, which has simplified the process for me. I felt also the need to enrich this, to give it flexibility. I feel at the moment the gap between the simplicity of the commercial section in material and the richness which you can get by a molding. There is obviously greater variety to be got. You can organize a form more richly if you're making it all yourself. The most important thing is measure. One is measuring all the time. One's eye is measuring, and this one can't talk about. This is an instinct in it of how much, how thick, how big, and where. One goes from one center of interest to another. This is a journey in time as well as in space. If one believes that the juice in a work really is to be got out of it by looking at it, then you won't get it all at once. That's to say that it needs a certain amount of space, a certain amount of quiet. Where do you find this? nowadays. I couldn't possibly leave it. It's my brain. And in a sense, I'm only happy in here. I'm longing to get back to it. I don't think I could conceivably give it up now. It seems to be my mind, and everything is in here. I believe I've always been very susceptible to analogy and the fact that forms repeat themselves. I think the mind is always searching for analogies in things. This happens when we name things. You give it the name which in a sense belongs to something else. You give it a likeness to something else. And I find that the more a form has a universality and is joined up to other things, I believe this is a very, very important element in things. It is for me. One must be led back to things in a sense which one recognizes. You can recognize forms which lie behind, elemental forms of plane and tube, ring, which lie behind so many structures. I think this is what ties me to the kind of forms I'm using now.